We are meeting electronically due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04. Please note that in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for assisting this meeting. Instructions are provided on our agenda, the City Council's website at concordnh.legistar.com/calendar.aspx. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the Finance Committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting, and the public has access to listen and, if necessary, to participate in this meeting through clicking on the following website address: us02web.zoom.us/day/849-590-32690. If any member of the public does not have access to website access, they may dial the telephone number 929-205-6099 and enter the webinar ID of 849-5903-2690. If anyone has problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-230-4619 or send an email to citycouncilmeeting@concordnh.gov. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at another time. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking the roll call on attendance. Mr. LeBron, if you could call the roll, please.
Councilor Bouchard.
Present. No one in the room.
Mayor Boulay.
At my office, no one else is here.
Councilor Champlin.
At home, no one else is in the room. Susan Champlin or Madeline Champlin may pass through.
Councilor Fennessy.
I'm here. I'm in my office by myself.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
I am in my home and my children are home.
Councilor Hatfield.
I'm here at home by myself.
Councilor Keach.
By myself.
Councilor Kennison.
Home by myself.
Councilor Kretovic.
Currently home by myself, but my son Jack or my husband Bill could pass through.
Councilor Matson.
I'm home and I'm alone in this room.
Councilor Nyan.
Present, at home, no one else in the room.
Councilor Pierce.
Present, at home, alone.
Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Present, at home, alone in this room.
Councilor Todd.
Here at home, no one else in this room.
Councilor Werner.
Here at home, no one else in this room.
All in attendance.
Great. Good to see everybody tonight. Tonight we have our budget presentation regarding special revenue funds, which are inspection, parking, airports, conservation property, golf arena, solid waste, and our enterprise funds of water and wastewater. So before I start and recognize the manager, does anybody have any questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Manager, the floor is all yours. Well, he unmutes. I guess I believe I'll turn to page 123, which is the inspection fund.
Your Honor, would you like to do the minutes first?
I can do them now, do the end, wherever. If you feel the need to do them now. Unfortunately, I don't get copies of the agenda for some reason, So let me go back to last week's agenda. All right, so we have the minutes of May 18th of 2020 of the Finance Committee before us. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Move approval.
Actually, I tell you, let's try to do this with one roll call. Got to get a motion for the approval of the May 18th and the May 21st Finance Committee meeting amendments.
So moved.
Councilor Kretovic, second.
Okay, motion been made by Councilor Champlin, second by Councilor Kretovic. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none. Mr. LeBron, could you call the roll for the motion to approve the minutes of May 18th and May 21st?
Councilor Champlin.
Aye.
Councilor Fennessy.
Yes.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
Yes.
You muted yourself, Brian.
Counselor Hatfield, my apologies.
Oh, yes.
Counselor Keach,
Yes.
Counselor Kennison,
Yes.
Counselor Kretovic,
Yes.
Counselor Mattson,
Yes.
Counselor Nyan,
Yes.
Counselor Pierce,
Yes.
Counselor Rice Hawkins,
Yes.
Counselor Todd,
Yes.
Counselor Werner,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bouchard,
Yes.
Mayor Boulay,
Yes.
all in favor.
Thank you. Motion is adopted. Mr. Manager, are there any minutes for the 28th? I don't have an agenda, or I don't get the minutes are sent out either. So do you, are there any other minutes?
No, those will be on your June 4th meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. So then I guess, do you have anything else?
I do not until we want to go into the individual funds.
Okay, so if we could all turn to page 123, we'll start with inspection fund, please.
Okay, page 123, we have the inspection fund, and we operate this fund utilizing city staff to perform construction inspection services versus using outside consultants. Revenues and expenses are dependent upon construction activity, primarily driven by the economy. Fiscal year 20, revenues are projected to exceed the budget and be short of expenses by $66,500. This will be more than available. There will be more than available working capital for this fund. I will bring a supplemental appropriation to the City Council once we determine the final revenues and expenses. We will likely need to transfer from general fund to cover the shortfall not made up by the available working capital. Fiscal year 21, revenues budget to budget are planned to decrease $72,400 or 19.9%. Expenses budget to budget are planned to decrease by $79,600 or 22.2%. Part of the expense decrease is the reallocation of wages and benefits to balance out the fund. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Anybody have any questions on the inspection fund? Okay, not seeing anybody with a hand raised. Can we talk about the parking fund, please, on 126?
So on page 126, under the parking fund, there's been a lot of work in the parking fund over the past few years, changes in meter locations, addition of meters, changes in expansion of enforcement time, staffing changes, improvements to the parking garages. With all these changes, we did not anticipate the COVID pandemic and the dramatic drop in revenues for parking. For fiscal year 2020, revenues are projected to be down $566,600 or 18.6%, and expenses are expected to be down $180,800, resulting in a loss of $261,000 or $385,800 worse than budget. For fiscal year 21, we're projecting that revenues will return to some level of normalcy. Revenues budget to budget are up $20,300 or less than 1%, and no increase in parking rates are planned for this year. Revenues for parking penalties, metered parking, rental income are projected to be down $86,500, and a planned transfer in from the Sears Block TIF, Tax Income Financing District, is up $91,500. Expenses budget to budget are up $247,100 or 8.4%, $65,600 for wages and benefit increases, $186,700 in debt service increase due to all those capital projects, $35,900 increase in real estate for leased spaces. And however, there's small reductions in other accounts. Also included in this budget are several new items that are very important for the maintenance of our facilities, mainly the School Street Garage, as the renovated structure will come online. School Street Garage, there's additional $1,000 for water and sewer charges, $8,300 for pavement markings, $25,000 for pressure washing, and there's a $6,250 revenue increase to help offset some of that. And be glad to answer any questions before we move on to the pro forma.
Thank you much. Does anybody have any questions regarding Council Pierce? Has your hand, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tried asking this question of the police chief a few meetings ago, and I was told to wait
about receivables or uncollected fines. Is now the time to talk about that or ask about that?
Please.
What is the outstanding balance of, I'm going to say uncollected fines or receivables? What is the right word, first of all?
I'll have Mr. Walsh answer that question.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Councilor Pierce, in anticipation of your question, we went back and took a look at uncollected parking tickets. Essentially, we went back for a period of 5 years. During that period of time, we wrote 112,000, just under 113,000 tickets. We have currently 12,886 tickets outstanding. The dollar amount with penalties and interest on that number for 5 years is $788,000. And that includes tickets that go to the general fund, as well as tickets that are retained by the parking fund.
Thank you. A follow-up, please.
Please.
And who is responsible for collecting those fees? Who's responsible for collecting those fees, the back fee?
We currently do that through the parking division. There has been some discussion about perhaps farming that out to an outside agency. There are entities that do that, but at the moment it is the responsibility of the parking fund. I would also note that the delinquency has risen actually since 2017. So if for 15, 16, and 17, our collection rate was around 93 or 94%. Starting in 18, that changed to about 86%. 19 was about 80%, and then so far this year is about 71%.
Thank you. Another follow-up. I assume this isn't considered low-hanging fruit, or we would have collected it. Is that correct?
It is challenging to collect. It's very time-consuming to collect. There are some communities in New Hampshire that have actually adopted a certain RSA, which is 231:130-A, which allows the municipality to withhold motor vehicle registrations in order to compel payment of parking tickets. Concord has not done that. It was something that was looked at a few years ago, but Manchester, Nashua, Laconia, Keene, and Dover, among others, have. But yes, it's challenging to collect.
Is this something, just quickly, beyond the budget, maybe for further discussion? Is this something that we should look at as a goal, as a percentage of collections each year, so we keep our eye on the ball? I'm sure you are keeping your eye on the ball, but is this something we could say that for further discussion, maybe 10 or 20% of the outstanding balance should be a goal to collect every year? I would imagine as delinquency goes up, collections will be harder and harder to obtain. So any thoughts on that?
It is something we can keep an eye on. I know this is something that we've looked at over time. There's been various options to discuss how to try and improve that number. But I think it's going to take, in addition to the efforts of the police department, I think, it'd be worth looking at various collection agencies, and it might also be worth the city's effort to look at that particular statute concerning motor vehicle registrations being withheld, non-payment of parking tickets.
Okay, thank you.
Council Chamberlain.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is for Mr. Walsh. This is a follow-up to Councilor Pierce's line of inquiry. Do I remember correctly that a large percentage of the delinquencies are for vehicles who are owned by people from outside the city?
Councilor Champlin, you're correct. When we did this analysis as part of the strategic planning effort, we looked at fiscal years 2010 through 2015. The outstanding tickets, about a third of them were Concord residents. The rest of them were from elsewhere. If you looked at other communities that have that statute, which is reciprocal for withholding motor vehicle registrations, approximately 50% of the tickets might be collectible.
Follow up, Your Honor.
Please.
Mr. Walsh, do I also recall that when we discussed the possibility of adopting that RSA in the parking committee, that there was concern about low-income working people in the city who, for one reason or another, might not be able to pay the fine, but who might not be able to renew the registration of the car that they needed for work in order to get to work. And there was, if I recall correctly, there was a good bit of discussion about that and concern about unintended consequences. Is that true? Or do you recall that?
Councilor Champlin, I do recall that conversation. That is correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilor Hatfield?
Thank you very much. I had two questions. The first, on page 127 under the 2021 goals, there's discussion in one area completing negotiation with long-term lessees. And I was wondering if that is successful, does that impact our revenue? And if so, where would that show up?
Councilor Hatfield, those negotiations have been going on now for multiple years, actually. I'm hopeful this will be the year that it gets done. We have not carried anything in the budget that may or may not, we have not carried anything in the budget relative to potential financial impacts, both negatively or positively. So the budget basically assumes status quo and nothing changes under the system that we have. In order to change those long-term agreements, we'll have to come to the city council with revised agreements with those parties, and any fiscal impact would be presented to the city council at that time when we were asking you to ratify those agreements.
Thank you. My second question is, thank you for the update on the pay by cell phone application. I was wondering if you were pleased with the, albeit brief period of time that we had, but if you were pleased with the response to that program.
Personally, I am pleased. We've had a couple of things that we've been working through with the vendor, but overall, I think the proof is in the pudding. We have 4,000 unique users in Concord, excuse me. And we have done something on the order of just under $30,000 worth of transactions since it went live on February 3rd. So the response has been very good, and we're pleased with it so far. So yes, we're happy with it.
Thank you. And just one last question for the city manager. Actually, in Appendix B, which is the which shows the program change requests under the parking fund, there was an online permit module that looks like it was requested, but then it wasn't included in the budget. And I was wondering if the manager could talk about what that was for and what we're losing by not funding it.
Why don't I have, if I could have Matt speak to what it was for, then I'll explain why I didn't fund it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hatfield, that was basically to try and implement an online permit module with the anticipation of be getting to permits. We already have in some of our facilities. Currently, folks have to literally fill out a paper application and provide it to pay. So the goal was to try and get it online, get a little more streamlined, more customer friendly, and less administratively burdensome.
And the reason for not funding it was because the condition of the fund is such that while it would be more convenient for folks and would be a good customer service improvement, it wouldn't really generate any additional revenue to help offset its cost. So if the fund was going in the proper direction, it would certainly make sense to fund it. But being that it's going in the other direction, it's not something. It's not a necessity at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walsh, with regards to the numbers that you spoke about for the reduction or outstanding parking fines, you said that about 33% are for residents that live in the city. 50% of the leftover are in state, and we'd be able to collect that. So that's essentially a third, right? A third in Concord, a third in the state, and then a third outside of the state. And there is reciprocity between communities, but is there reciprocity between states?
Thank you for your question, Councilor Kretovic. So a third of the analysis that was done in the past determined that, yes, roughly a third of them are Concord residents or were at the time. There's another percentage or so between Manchester, Nashua, and other places that would probably get us around 50% of collection because of that reciprocity. I'm not aware of reciprocity that extends beyond state borders, though. I can look into that for you, but I'm not aware of it.
And then a follow-up question. Do we have a sense of what is attributing to our collection rate being not as successful as it was a couple of years ago?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I would note something we can certainly take a look at, but I don't have anything that would explain why 18, 19, and 20, other than there was some staff vacancy and there was a change where the parking fiscal technician was vacant for a period of time and then a new person came on, so that could contribute to part of that, which did happen in the last couple of years. But beyond that, I don't have an immediate explanation for you.
And then if you went to a collection agency, would you also have a sense of what the percentage is that they would then take for collection?
It depends on the vendor that we would use, but that cost can run a few dollars per ticket or more, depending on what that is. There would be it wouldn't be a massive fee, but it would be a fee that the city would have to pay. It would be somewhere. So it's something that I would have to get you more information on.
Yeah, you don't need to guess. That's okay. Yeah. I just, if you had that analysis off the top of your head from your previous review, that would be great. But I do think it's something that we can look at in the future. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Mr. Manager, could you move to the pro forma, please?
Sorry, if you go to the pro forma, which is the next item, you want to go near the bottom of the page. The first column of numbers is for the fiscal year 20 budget. It shows a projected net $124,800. This is the budgeted profit for fiscal year 20. As you can see, the second column is the same projected net line. We are now estimating a loss of $261,000, or that's the $385,600 worse than budget. The next column is for fiscal year 21, and we're budgeting a loss of $101,900. If you look at the next couple of lines down, titled Beginning and Ending Working Capital, you'll see fiscal year 21 working capital is $312,000, or just slightly below the 10% expenses goal. So if everything turns out as budgeted, we'll be in a good stead. I'll keep you updated as we finish fiscal year 20 and progress to fiscal year 21. But before we leave the pro forma, I'm sure you have questions. If you go up to the top three lines under revenues, you'll see a note that shows rate increases are projected in fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 28. And you'll notice an increase in the revenues those years. So we're just projecting those out. And as always, those increases are subject to approval of the City Council. Parking Advisory Committee will review those, make a recommendation to City Council, and City Council will have to decide whether or not to make any changes at all in the parking rates. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
This is Councilor Pierce, if I may. I'll let this parking thing go for now, but would we be able to track this number of the uncollected balance or the receivables under a fund position so that number is up in front of us on a regular basis, or is that a bad idea?
So the parking tickets that are delinquent are not part of, we don't book them as a receivable. Basically, that revenue is booked as revenue when the money is actually collected. So in order for there to be an ongoing analysis of that number, it wouldn't show up on our financial statements, so to speak. It would have to be a separate report. So it could be done by the parking group, but it would have to be done as a separate report. We're not going to report it as a receivable on our financial statements.
Is just to follow up, is that because we don't want to, or is that not generally accepted accounting principles as a receivable?
In this case, it wouldn't be generally accepted accounting principles, only because we're not booking the revenue until we collect the money. So if we started to book it as a receivable, then we would show the revenue coming in during that time. And we know that there's a very high percentage on those uncollectible amounts. There's still a high percentage that will not be collected. So it would be disproportionately reporting revenue that really won't end up coming in. As Mr. Walsh indicated, it's very difficult to collect a lot of those overdue parking tickets. So we don't want to overstate the revenue number.
What's that? Councilor Fennessy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. I'm not sure who it's best directed towards, but it's projected for fiscal year 2022 that there will be an even bigger net loss than there will be this coming fiscal year, which appears to be based upon some increased debt service. And I'm wondering what that pertains to.
Mr. Walsh can answer that question.
I've been unmuted. Councilor Fennessy, I think you're correct. Debt service, which is something that's rising dramatically in the pro forma because of capital needs, deferred maintenance and garages, that's part of it. And then another part of it is there is going to be some adjustment to annual revenues because of projects that might be happening. So keep in mind, we have projects not only in 22, we'll have a project most likely in the State Street parking garage that will affect revenue there. So some of those things, capital projects will cause us to lose revenues in the facilities, just like we're losing revenue right now in the School Street parking garage.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Please.
Mr. Walsh, so if I'm understanding the fiscal 2021 correctly, I know there's been some discussion about the purchase of additional parking meters and kiosks. Am I to understand that looking at the projections right now or the request for 2021, that does not include that additional debt service, does it?
So the debt service sold in fiscal 21 will fiscal 22. There's usually about a year delay because of how our debt system works. We would sell debt probably in January, and the first payment would be due July of 21, which is actually fiscal 22.
So is the debt service level in 2022 that we're looking at projected, is that based upon the assumption that we're doing the parking meters and the kiosks in fiscal year 2021?
That is correct. That debt service for it's a $850,000 project, of which 820 or 30,000 of it is going to be new money, and that has been modeled in the pro forma for that debt service beginning in fiscal 2022.
Thank you.
Councilor Pierce, excuse me. Councilor Pierce, did you ask your question already? Okay. Councilor Keach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walsh, is it correct? Is it correct comparison to compare the ambulance collections to the parking ticket collections? If it were to involve a collection agency, it's like 50% return on that investment, so to speak. It's the same sort of fund. It's not on the books. Is that right?
I can't speak to the collection process for I know nothing about the ambulance collection process and how that works and what it cost us. I can tell you I did receive a text from Mr. Florence, who is watching this meeting right now, and he informed me that the collection service fees for parking tickets could be up to 60% of what's actually collected. But I can't answer anything relative to ambulance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else with a hand raised, then I think we're ready to move on to airport.
Okay, you want to go to agenda item number 6. That's on page 132. For fiscal year 2020, revenues and expenses are both in line with the budget, and fund is expected to perform slightly better than planned. For fiscal year 21, revenues budget to budget are up $12,700 due to the lease increases in an airport operators grant. Expenses budget to budget are up $16,600 due to wage and debt service increase. And if you go to the attachment for the pro forma, if you go to the projected net number, fiscal year 20 has a budgeted loss of $82,400. We're estimating an actual loss of $66,200, so it's $16,200 to the better than what we had budgeted. For fiscal year 21, we're budgeting a $86,200 loss. If you go to the second to the last line at the bottom, this is where the ending working capital is. For fiscal year 21, this number is $322,900, significantly ahead of the 10% expense goal. While this fund is least impacted by the pandemic issues, we're currently dealing with the long-term for this fund losing money each year. And in 2026, we're projecting to be a negative capital working position, which means that the general fund will have to start supporting the fund at that time if something doesn't happen between now and then. Glad to answer any questions.
Councilor Keach.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else say? Mr. Manager, moving along.
So next you want to go to item agenda number 7, which is conservation property, and go to page 135. This fund is designed to account for the revenues from leased properties and the acquisition and management of conservation properties. Revenues budget to budget are down $22,200, mainly due to planned reduction of a transfer in from the trust to offset expenses. And expenses budget to budget are down $22,200, mainly due to the reduction in outside services for appraisals and consultant surveys. Glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Manager, moving along.
The next item you would like to go to is the golf, number 8. And you want to be on page 138. For fiscal year 2020, revenues are estimated to be down a total of $188,500 compared to budget across all categories. While we had a good year going before the COVID-19, we're making the most of what is now available. We are maximizing the tee sheet and been very busy with both members and greens fees customers. City Council also revised the membership rate based on the recommendations of the Golf Advisory Committee. The overall number of memberships is holding up well. Also, all outings have been rescheduled, or almost all outings have been rescheduled to the end of the summer or the fall season. We're managing expenses as much as possible and taking extra action to maintain social distancing guidelines, sanitizing carts, and customer contact area. As we get to the end of the fiscal year 20, we will continue to update council on revenue expense results and projections. For fiscal year 21, revenues budget to budget are up $31,600, and a projected increase in seasonal passes, daily fees, league and tournament fees, and pro shop sales. The outings that were scheduled for the spring and early summer have mostly been rescheduled to late summer and fall, so we expect added revenue during August, September. If they do not occur, obviously there'll be an impact in lowered revenues for those months. Fiscal year 21, expenses budget to budget are up $31,600 due to wages, supplies, debt service increases. We're working to manage expenses to the greatest extent possible. Keeping the course in very good condition is critical to revenue generation. You'll also notice that I've added 3 PCRs for this fund, $1,500 for tent cleaning and storage to protect that investment, $500 for a PA system for the tent, and $2,000 for a cover for the tent floor to protect that. And again, the same investment. Glad to answer any questions before we move on to the pro forma.
Councilor Hatfield.
Thank you. Again, referring to Appendix B, which shows the different department requests versus what's in the budget, I noted that most of the requests were not funded. So I was wondering if the manager can speak to, is that simply because revenues are down, and do you feel comfortable not doing things like the furnace replacement and other requests?
Yes, all of those items that I'm looking at, not just furniture, all those individual items, again, are because of the condition the fund is in. I think if we had the year that we thought we were going to have this year without the COVID situation, those probably would be items that I would have funded. But because those revenues didn't come in, and it looks like while we could do relatively well, we still have a shortened season because of COVID, and we're not going to have those dollars. So I didn't want to overextend it. And in reality, if you think about how those would actually be funded, they'd have to really be funded by the general fund to make them. So that would increase taxes, and I didn't want to go that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, a few months ago, probably 6 months ago or so, you had come to the City Council and advised us that the New Hampshire Golf Association was interested at potentially having space to rent at the golf course in some capacity at the clubhouse. And at that time, we were talking about renovations to the clubhouse, or there is, in the super out years of the budget, the potential to rebuild a new clubhouse. Are we keeping in sight the fact that having a relationship with the New Hampshire Golf Association actually is a huge benefit to the golf course and would be an additional revenue stream? Understanding we can't do those type of arrangements now based on our current circumstances, but are we continuing that conversation with this organization?
Yes, yes, Councilor. I think both organizations look at it as a benefit where both could win on this. The city would have not only the activity that would go on by the Golf Association, but also the lease revenue that would come along with it, and any type of events that they'd want to have, I think would be good for all parts of the golf course. And also it would be good for them to actually have a home and have a place that they can invest in. And so I think it's a win-win for both of us. So it is something I think in my mind and in Mr. LeBrun's mind, who's been working very closely managing the golf course. I think it makes sense for both of us to bring that to fruition at the appropriate time.
Great, thank you.
Matt, you want to take us to the pro forma?
Yes, sir. So if you go to the pro forma, that next item, you go to the bottom of the page, the projected net, and see that this fund is budgeted to break even fiscal year 20, and that is with a $57,400 transfer in from the general fund. So that's what was budgeted. Now the estimated results are a loss of $165,300, and I expect this number to change based on actual year-end results. Again, that's the COVID impact. If you look at the fiscal year 21 column, we're budgeting to break even in this coming fiscal year. This is our best projection based on the issues that we're facing today. How this will impact the operation next fiscal year, we'll keep you updated. We'll closely monitor this. And before we leave the pro forma, we are projecting each year through fiscal year 26 to break even, which would include a continued support from the general fund. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Councilor Credit.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, when it comes to the golf course, we typically talk in terms of rounds of golf. We were really fortunate that we were able to get a couple of rounds of golf or days of golf in March, which is so atypical for our golf course. But typically, we're going in April, and we are open and moving forward. Of course, that didn't happen this year, but we have numbers based upon what we projected for May, that we would have rounds of golf, and we did lose some days there. How are we trending? What is our year over year comparison, May to May. And when we talk in terms of membership, what was our membership at this time last year versus our membership now, given that the council was confident that we could recover some of those monies by adding to our membership? Is it working?
That's a good question. I think that this I think is really a good test of whether or not continue to make investments in the golf course are actually going to pay dividends by when you can actually match up month to month for the years that you can actually achieve the full month. So if you look at 2019 versus 2020 for May, the total number of rounds is up 24% this year. The total member rounds is up 34%. So when I say that number, so if you look at member rounds, you had 858 last year for May. This year you have 1,305. If you look at greens fee rounds, they're up 17%. Green fee revenue is up 23%. Cart revenue is up 7%. Membership total is down slightly from 206 to 200, but that's to be expected because of the late increase. So I think if you look at those, it all seems to be working quite well. If we can just put together some good months in a row, and maybe even next year start the year off in a good fashion where we don't have ice in April and May, or you don't have COVID in April or March or April. And if you look at year from March 1st to May 31st, the total rounds are down 5% when you look at the season from the beginning to today, essentially. And that is really because of the COVID. So it's only down from 3,493 total rounds last year to 3,304. So that's actually pretty amazing. We've actually made a lot of progress this past month in catching up to those numbers in a very short time. So actually, if the weather is reasonably cooperative the rest of the year, I think we're going to we do reasonably well this year.
Just a follow-up comment, Your Honor. Given that we lost the entire month of April and the numbers are only down 5%, that is extraordinary. And then at the same time, if our membership ratio is 200 versus 206 that we had last year, 6 memberships, we still have people that are stuck in Florida that are the seasonal half year here, half year there individuals. I think that's all very good news. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's fascinating.
Thank you, Your Honor. Quick question, sort of following up on Councilor Kredovic's question. We had made a decision to lower some of the rates for the membership. And we had, I think at the last advisory council meeting for the golf committee, we had heard some anecdotal information that as a result, there had been some change between membership types where people had actually upgraded. Do we have any numbers on that? Have we seen more of that, or was that just a few memberships here and there?
Yeah, we did have some changes in the categories of the memberships. I don't have that right in front of me as far as how that is as of today, but I'd be glad to get that information and forward it out to the council.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Before we move on, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say I'm mighty impressed with your golf knowledge this evening.
I just been coached up.
I think you have.
The manager's just joining us lately.
Way to go, Phil.
He had a caddy.
Well played. All right. And seeing no further questions, I think we can move on to the arena.
So with the arena, you want to be on item number 9. You want to be on page 142. So for fiscal year 2020, revenues budget to estimate are down $14,300 due to rental income and concession stands and are related to the stay-at-home orders, essentially. Expenses budget to estimate are ahead of budget $29,300 due to wages, outside services, supplies, and utilities. Fiscal year 21, revenues budget to budget are up $14,400 or 2.2%. due to increased pro shop sales, concession sales, and rental income. Expenses budget to budget are up $20,300 or 3.1% due to increased wages, outside services, supplies, and utilities. Also note that capital outlay is down $15,800. I'm proposing several PCRs for the arena, $4,200, a program change request, additions to the budget, $4,200 for, is that me? $4,200 to replace the pressure relief valves every 5 years. That's a replacement required by OSHA and EPA. $7,060 for mechanical integrity inspections, again, EPA required every 5 years. $6,250 for process hazard analysis, that's EPA and OSHA required. I love the government, right? $840 for Square credit card processing fees. $5,000 increase in cost for goods sold. $8,500 decrease in facility rentals due to loss of floor shows. $12,500 additional revenue due to starting the ice 1 week earlier this year, and $500 to purchase skating helmets for rentals. Again, this budget is anticipating the arena operations get back to normal, and any change will impact the results. I'd be glad to answer any questions before we move on to the pro forma.
Any questions?
Oops, I do.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, somebody.
It's Councilor Mattson.
Oh,
Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. So one of the things that comes to mind is we obviously don't have numbers or true projections, but the floor shows do add quite a bit of revenue, and those are certainly dependent on numbers of people, which with social distancing is going to probably negatively impact. And if I recall, there were some of these floor shows, they have quite a lead time that they have to have. And so I assume that this is already affecting us quite badly. If they can't have their floor show and it's 6 months from now, then they're likely not going to have it this year and maybe have to wait until next year. Am I on the right track with the lead times for some of these floor shows is quite large? And they'll cancel, I guess, is what I'm concerned about.
We really need to know by the end of this month whether or not we can go ahead with some of these shows.
Right.
If we can give the word out to folks that they can do these, have these shows really in August, September going forward, then it'd be okay. If it turns out they can't have major events or large gatherings like that, then that will impact the revenue considerably, yes.
Follow up, Your Honor?
Please.
Is there any thought to utilizing the outdoor space as well to try to mitigate some of that, or are the floor shows strictly dependent upon being indoors?
Let me bring in Mr. Chesley, and he's there in the bunker with his team, and I think they can provide the best answer to that.
Thank you.
Chip?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
For the most part, most of the floor shows are inside the arena. You're right, Counselor. I've got Jeff Bardwell with me, 6 feet away in the bunker, who can speak to any particular details. But I think Tom has pretty well articulated our position right now. We're in a wait and see to see if we can proceed, and we'll go forward as cautiously and appropriately as we can, given the restraints that we have to operate under.
Thank you.
Anyone else any questions? And then, Mr. Manager.
So if you go to the pro forma, which is the next item, the fund has a budgeted gain of $18,300. It's now showing an estimated loss of $25,400. If you go to the fiscal year 21 column, we're budgeting a gain of $12,400 for fiscal year 21. General services and the arena staff have done an excellent job in managing all the arena programs. And fortunately, the ice season was just about complete by mid-March when the stay-at-home orders were issued. The majority of lost revenues are the result of decreased rentals for floor shows and any concession income that resulted from those shows. Before leaving the pro forma, if you look at the projected net for the remainder of the years through fiscal year 26, the fund is showing annual losses. The fund balance is okay to carry the arena through 2024, but starting in 2025, the general fund will likely need to start making transfers to the arena, much like they currently do in other funds. And the reason for this is the council has tried to keep the rates down and the costs down for the users of the arena. But the trade-off for that is you're not going to have the revenue to offset the costs. And as you can see, some of the capital improvements that we're having to make there are from the aging arena. So if you want to have a good quality product and you want to keep the rates down for the users, particularly the children, then there's a trade-off is you're not going to have enough to continue to make those investments without having an offset from the general fund. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Councilor Hatfield.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, I noted in the budget notes, on page 143, note 3, identified a 2020 goal of exploring energy saving measures, including solar, which could reduce the expenses of the arena. And understandably, it's not started, but I was wondering if you could speak to whether you think that would be a realistic goal to work on in 2021.
Yes, it is. And actually, I'd like to have Mr. Bardwell or Mr. Chesley come on and talk about the specifics of it, if you like. Chip, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Bardwell, who knows a little bit more about it than I do.
Okay, thank you for the question. And we looked at solar several years ago, and one of the roofs is south-facing. It wasn't at that time economically feasible, but it's been a long enough time, and technologies, has come each year, has come quite a way. So it is worth looking into again for a goal for this coming year. There are several arenas now that do have solar, so we have some comparisons that we can take and make with other facilities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Chesley, can you tell me what high schools currently rent ice time down there, and are the rates equal between all the high schools?
The rates are equal, and Jeff is pulling out the rate sheet right now.
As far as the schools that skate out of there, it's Concord High, Boys and Girls, Bow High School, and Pembroke Academy. They all pay the same rate, the prime rate or the non-prime, depending on what time they skate.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Champion.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is for Mr. Espel. I may not have quite grasped what you were saying relative to our expansions and the projected deficit at the arena. Are you thinking that, excuse me, the expansions will help us make inroads against those projected deficits, or are they really just going to help us kind of tread water?
I think if you look at the, and we'll get into that in a second. Let me just flip to a sheet here. There's continued bonded CIP costs going forward. So if without making some sort of investment in the facility, I think the cost of the arena going forward, just because of its age and the cost of replacements, and you already will be at the top of the market in terms of what you charge for, whether it's shows or ice time. You are not going to have the opportunity to simply cover your costs. So, but if you make an investment, I think there is an opportunity that's worth looking at to determine whether or not if you make the investment and you could get some lease revenue from the user there and to continue to make improvements to the facility, that might be your best model going forward. The reason I think the Arena Advisory Committee has looked at that is because the services that are being provided by the arena itself right now really aren't the level that they would like them to be, particularly from a food service for not only the shows that go on there, but also the rental of the ice time. So if we could improve that, also this is I think an integral link, and I believe in the Merrimack River Greenway Trail, because this will be, this is really almost a halfway point in downtown before you shoot off north to Boscawen or head down the river. So it would be a good stopping point. I think it's got fantastic visibility. If it wasn't already an ice arena, this would be one of the top marketable pieces of property in the city, I think. So why not take advantage of that and see if there's a revenue source that you can create to help reinvest in the arena, keep costs down, but also make sure you have the level of service that you want there. So it's definitely worth looking at. So to answer the question, yes, if you make that investment, I think you can more than tread water, but I think you'll always, we've looked at redoing the parking lot. Redoing the parking lot is going to cost you $1 million. Where are you going to get the revenue to help offset the cost of that annual basis? And also you've looked at the property to the east of that, which is owned by the city, and how that could be renovated into some sort of outdoor music setup or theater or something else that could go there. It really is untapped property. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. We just need to activate it.
I agree with you in that regard. I think it is a prime piece of property. And, my question wasn't motivated by criticizing the expansion, which I think has a lot of merit. And thank you for expanding upon the reasons for it. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Espel. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? Seeing none, Mr. Manager, moving along.
Your Honor, you want to go to item number 10, which is the Solid Waste Fund. You want to be on page 146. So the Solid Waste Advisory Committees work with the General Services Department and have kept this fund operational and flexible. This has allowed City Council the ability to provide a pause in the purple bag program for solid waste disposal during the pandemic year. You had a good battle. A few quick notes as we get started, a few pieces of information about the temporary reprieve on the payment program. As you know, solid waste tonnage has increased about 45 tons per week. The extra tonnage cost is about $3,000 per week. The extra collection crew is about $6,750 a week, so $6,750 a week. And the lost bag revenue translates to about $98,000 a month. Recycling tonnage has remained relatively constant, so people are continuing to recycling, which is great. For fiscal year 20, revenues budget to estimate are down $356,500 due to commercials disposal sales, the payment as you throw program changes, and a payment as you throw container income. Expenses budget to estimate are down $74,700 due to lower compensation and lower outside services. For fiscal year 21, revenues budget to budget are down $42,100 or less than 1%, mainly due to lowered commercial disposal revenues. Expenses budget to budget are up $43,000 or 1% due to increased wages and benefits, contractual costs, and utilities. Also included in this budget are these are increases that I've added to the budget, $3,000 for increased street sweeping costs and $7,000 for continued PFAS testing on Old Turnpike Road landfill. I'd be glad to answer any questions before we go to the pro forma.
Anybody have any questions? Mr. Manager, Council Kinson. Council Cassidy.
Well, just following up on our temporary pay to throw policy. Can you give an idea of how much that's cost us so far? City Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Manager, you just stated that it was $10,000 a month. I thought it was $10,000 a week. The information that Mr. Clark had provided us was $10,000 a week. I can't hear you.
Let me go back and read what I read. Extra tonnage cost is $3,000 per week. Extra collection crew cost is $6,750 per week. So there's $10,000 per week.
Then you said 97,000 per month. Got it.
Correct. So you put them together. So if you divide the 93,000 by 4, you're about 22,500 per week.
Did that answer your question, Council Casson?
So that's $39,000 a week is what it costs.
Okay, thank you.
Council Hatfield.
Thank you. Councillor Kretovic asked a question at one of our prior meetings, and we got it about the spring and fall yard waste leaf collection program. And I was wondering if we decided to make the changes that were discussed in that response document, would that reduce costs for 21? And if so, if we just did the bag program for the fall, would that reduce costs? And if so, where would that show up in the expense lines?
Give me a minute to pull out that report. I don't have that right in part of my presentation. Joe? Thank you, Bob. It's not. Okay, so the I'm going to get to.
Somebody like a whistling teapot down or something? Anything else here?
It's Councilor Hatfield.
Go down.
Yeah. Okay, so the so the question is, where would the savings be?
Correct. Thank you.
Hold on one second. I don't see that explains that where it would be. I'd have to bring Chip on for that.
Okay, well, I can follow up with a written request if that's helpful.
I think we can get the answer now.
Okay.
Do you mind just repeating the question for me? Do you understand what you're looking for?
Sure. So I was trying to understand the response, which was really helpful to kind of walk through, bagged versus bulk. But I was trying to sort of boil it down to, if we decided to just do the bagged and not the bulk, what would the savings be, and where would that show up in the budget? Is that under outside services or under compensation?
And the bulk is considered to be the vacuum pickup. So you're suggesting you'd like to do away with the vacuum pickup?
Well, we got Chip on. I had seen actually this program actually increasing taxes and changes, but so that's why I'm confused by where the savings would be. But Chip, could you?
Sure. You can hear me?
Yes.
The underlying concern is the viability, the practicality of deploying staff as we have traditionally performed the bulk leaf collection. That requires putting a group of labor together, 4 to 5 people, to work 7 hours a day within close proximity. Given the challenges of COVID-19, I don't know if that's really practical or realistic. So for this fall, in order to provide collection for the same length of time, what that proposal suggests is to have the community place their leaves in bags, and they would be collected by GSD staff. It would be a smaller crew, maybe 2 people on the ground, that could be rotated on a periodic basis to keep people fresh because they're wearing face masks that would inhibit their productivity. And what we would need to do is to rent 3 packer trucks, which are available. And that would be actually a net increase this year of $10,000 to the budget. The $10,000 would be outside services. There would be a savings that could be realized by deleting the about $40,000 in contracted services for the 3-week bag program. Alternatively, if the council wanted to not increase taxes, then the program, instead of being 6 weeks in length, could be 4 weeks in length. And there would be no increase. And that could be affected by renting those same 3 packers for $40,000 and deleting the current bag program where we hire Casella for $40,000.
Okay, Councilor Hadley, do you have a follow-up to that?
Yes, thank you. No, that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor President.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Councilor Hatfield, I appreciate you bringing this forward. When we received the report, I was most interested in hearing what it actually takes to do the leaf pickup, the curbside pickup. We're talking about 7 people that they're at times less than a foot away from each other. And if you've ever watched the crews around the city, it does not seem to be even close to a possibility to do that type of work with any type of social distancing. It's very hard labor. And at the same time, this is our road crew that is doing this work. These are the same people that we're going to be expected to be out there in the snowstorms running the snow plows. When we as a city council and as a community are looking at adapting the ways in which we bury people because of social distancing, we ought to be looking at this luxury service that we have in the city and what that impact is on our city staff when you have 7 people gathered around picking up leaves. Environmentally, it's not always the best option. We could be raking our leaves into our garden. It will be breaking down and it will be adding nutrients to the soil. We can run our lawnmowers in order to mulch the leaves. This isn't something that has to be so impactful. And yet at the same time, just the amount of labor that it takes to run this program is worth consideration of review. Thanks.
So to be clear, you are in favor of suspending the bringing your leaves to the curb. That's what I'm hearing you say?
I'm saying that it's something worth review for this year, given the situation that we're in.
So when they write this in the paper, I'm not for that. Okay? Just get that out of the way right now. So nobody has to call me. Nobody has to yell at me. It's not my idea. Oh goodness.
Well, and to be clear, I'm not proposing that either. I was just trying to get a good understanding of the numbers. Thank you.
Councilor Pitt. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you. Just for clarity, is there a portion of the vacuum leaf service that picks up leaves that don't necessarily get collected or piled by residents, but may just be on city streets throughout neighborhoods that wouldn't necessarily have somebody putting them in one area that the vacuum picks up?
Go ahead. Chip, you got that?
Yes, historically, if you get the leaves to the curb, city crews will pick them up. The exception would be, parks and cemeteries who have their own crews picking up their own leaves.
Follow up.
Please.
So I'm sorry, what I was trying to get at is, are there areas of town where you do the bulk leaf collections, not necessarily in the residential spots, but because of the drainage system or other things that you're picking up? Just out of curiosity.
Sure. Principally, generally speaking, it takes us about 5 weeks to do the closed drainage section of the community, and we do that in the beginning of the program. The last week is what we call our sprint through the country roads for those people that have put their leaves in open drainage areas. We try to pick those up during that last week, and that's usually the one area of the program that's most vulnerable to the early onset of snowfall.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Manager?
Councilor Keach has a question.
Yes, Mr. Manager. We're talking about leaf collection. Like, roughly off the top of your head, what percentage of the budget would that be? Like 0.0001% or something?
It actually comes out of the solid waste fund, so it doesn't have a it really doesn't have an impact on the general fund or your taxes. So if that's the question, there's two parts to this. That's the question. It really doesn't have if you were to make changes, unless you change something in terms of maybe the transfer from the general fund to the solid waste fund that happens every year, but that really covers your other costs. It really has no impact on the general fund.
Thank you. That was my question. It doesn't impact the tax rate at all, unless it has to be subsidized somehow. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Manager?
Okay. So we're going to do the pro forma of the solid waste fund. So if you look at this item, if you go to projected net line at the bottom of the page, you'll see that for fiscal year 20 column, we had budgeted $80,800 loss. And the loss is now estimated at $362,500 due to changes in the pay-as-you-throw program, due to the governor's emergency order, and the downturn in the economy, because obviously less trash going. If you go to the next column of fiscal year 21, the projected net is a loss of $166,200. And the very bottom two lines show the estimated ending working capital for fiscal year 21 being $1.1 million, which is significantly better than the 10% expense goal. If you look at the fiscal year 22 column, in the revenue section, sixth line down, 25% pay-as-you-throw increase is projected, and this will bring the projected net for fiscal year 22 through 24 into the positive. If you continue along the fiscal years through fiscal year 25 and 26, those years are showing annual losses and reducing the ending working capital. You will also notice that the lines in the expense are showing adjustments for pay-as-you-throw and recycling contract adjustments. The contract with Casella ends in fiscal year 24. We'll be negotiating a contract extension or otherwise expect to increase costs at that time, especially for what is occurring in the recycling world today. So we expect paying very, very much more for recycling than we pay today. We will continue to work with Solid Waste Advisory Committee on these issues and bring recommendations to City Council at the appropriate time. So again, those projected revenue increases in the pay-as-you-throw are all up to the City Council, and you can determine whether or not you want to change those numbers or not. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, just a higher level question. With regards to funds that may come from the state to help with the COVID crisis, will those funds in any way trickle down into this solid waste fund, or will it just go into general funds? And then as we do, well, just what would happen with that money? Would it affect the numbers in each of these funds?
I don't see any dollars because really the pay-as-you-throw reduction in terms of the revenues coming in aren't something you can recover based on the programs that we're seeing right now. What you can recover, I believe, is the additional tonnage that we ended up collecting. And we've actually submitted for this round. I'm trying to remember by, let me see if anybody has that. There's a share for the additional tonnage that has been created. There's a cost we can recover for that, but it's relatively small. I believe it's under $20,000 for at least as of right now. So it'll be minor dollars in the relative scheme here, because essentially what the pay-as-you-throw program did, the reprieve from that was you essentially reduce revenues. By considerably, you increase costs small. We might be able to capture that and get dollars back for that increase in costs, but not for the revenues. That help with the question?
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Question for the manager. Would you please remind us when the current contract with the Casella Company expires? And when would city staff begin review of either renewal of that contract or search for additional possibilities for a new contract? Thank you.
So based on my notes, the contract expires the end of fiscal year 24. So that would be June of 2024. So you really should start working on that. I would suggest 3 years beforehand. By the time you do the analysis, figure out what the community wants in terms of recycling and solid waste disposal, and then put together the bid documents, go out to bid, negotiate, make awards, have everything ready, make sure the equipment's in place. So you really should start, I would say, the spring of 21.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, Mr. Manager?
Would like me to move on to the next? Okay. So the next item is agenda item number 11, which is the water fund. Starting on page 151. As we review this budget, please note that I am recommending to keep the water rates the same for fiscal year 21, so there's no change in the water rate structure. Fiscal year 20, revenues budget to estimate are down $120,800 due to water usage being lower than planned. Water production is down due to all the restaurants, hotels, business closures during the pandemic. Expenses budget to estimate are down $27,300, mainly due to utility savings associated with that. Fiscal year 21, revenues budget to budget are up $93,200 or 1.5%, mainly due to anticipated increases in the water usage and backflow device testing as we get back to normal. Expenses budget to budget are up $462,000 or 7.3%. That's mainly due to increases in wages and benefits, debt service, again, major investments in the facility, and transfer out to the general fund. We've also included two program chain requests in this budget, $6,500 for confined spaced equipment and $33,200 for water meter testing. Be glad to answer any questions before we move to the pro forma.
Any questions? So now let's move to the pro forma, please.
Okay. So you want to go to the next item in your agenda, pro forma. And for the pro forma, we want to go to the projected net numbers on the bottom of the page. As you can see, we budgeted a loss of $55,800 for fiscal year 20, and now estimating this loss to be $149,300 due to lower water production. fiscal year 21, we're projecting a loss of $424,600. And again, I'm not recommending a water rate increase this year. Typically I would, but because of the costs and expenses on the community, I thought we could go one more year without an increase. If you go to the ending working capital line, you can see this fund is still very healthy with an ending working capital of 3.2 million compared to a target of 1.7 million. That gives you the flexibility of not going for the rate increase this year. Or if you follow the projected net line in future years, we're projecting losses each year, and the rate increases are due to minimize these losses. So even with the rate increases, these losses chip away at the working capital through fiscal year 26, with ending working capital is about equal to the working capital target. That's where you've actually wanted to go. You don't want to carry, you have not wanted to carry all these extra dollars. Hopefully we don't have another pandemic where you're going to need them, but that's the direction you've asked us to go in. Any questions on the pro forma before I move to the water rate comparison chart?
Why don't you go ahead? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Council Hatfield.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, when was the last water rate increase? Do you recall?
It would be 2019. We did not do one, so we did not do one this year. We're not proposing one for next year, so it'll be the year before that.
So 2018.
Calendar, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You want to look at the water rate sheet?
So you'll want to go to the next item on your agenda, fiscal year 21 water rate comparison. As you can see, Concord's water rate is one of the lowest of the comparable communities. These are the communities that you've asked us to compare, the new councilors. These are the ones you've asked us to compare in the past. Just note for this chart, past years have shown dollar amounts by community based on average consumption. We think that that's somewhat misleading a little bit. So we're actually doing the rates themselves. We will need a rate increases in the future, but considering the state of the working capital balance and the increase in the water wastewater fund, which we'll get to next, that we thought it best to hold the line on rate increases for this year. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, questions, Council Chairman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Espel, could you just give a little bit more detail as to why we are so well positioned compared to municipalities like Portsmouth and Dover? And then conversely, why Manchester has a fairly significantly lower rate than ours?
I think when you look at some of the larger communities from a population user standpoint, there's an economy of scale which they can achieve, which we cannot achieve. Because if you think about it, two parts of this. One is the distribution systems are generally, we have such a large geographic territory. Not that the water goes out to the entire city, because we do have an urban growth boundary, but you have a very large distribution system. And you also don't have a lot of very high users. Maybe the Hood plant for the most part, but for the most part, if you go to some communities, they might have, for example, if you go to, say, Londonderry, which uses Manchester water, you'll have a Coca-Cola facility, you have a Stonyfield Farm yogurts facility. Very, very high users in terms of water and wastewater. But in these cases, we don't have a lot of high users. So a lot of our numbers are based on a lot of residential use. The city, I think the real reason for why our rate is lower than most of the other communities is the city council got way out in front decades ago, bought large pieces of property to protect our water source, and decided to make very good investments in distribution system and in the plant itself. So actually over the last several years, you've been doing your staff have been doing a lot of great work, not me, your staff have done a lot of great work with conservation measures. So we had thought, if you would go back 10 years ago, we had thought by 2030, we were probably going to have to tap into the Merrimack River for additional water sources to provide for the community. That's probably not now until 2040 because of the conservation measures that have been put in place. And we think actually there's more conservation measures that we can put in place to try to keep that down. So if you can keep the major capital investments down, relatively speaking. We have to do some now, and the plant is aging now, but your distribution system is in very, very good condition, relatively speaking. So there's a lot of pieces that the council did over the last, I'm going to say 50 years, 75 years, to put this council in a good position with water rates and a good product. Again, 3 of the last 4 years, the best tasting water in the state of New Hampshire. So, preach that.
Thank you for that context, Mr. Espel. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Could you just briefly explain the transfer out? In the pro forma there, it shows 4, and I was just wondering about the 3 that are labeled trust, general, and solid waste.
I'll have Mr. LeBrun.
Yes, okay. When you look at the transfer outs, we have 3 different categories. One, we transfer some dollars to the trust fund. Those are from the enterprise funds, some dollars that go to the paving program, and then we have a reserve for future water issues that we put some money aside for. The second one is the transfer to general fund. That one is for the general overhead that we charge to the enterprise funds that covers everything from the city manager's office to legal to accounting and things like that. So that's the covering of the overhead for the general fund. And then the third one is the solid waste fund. That one is really to cover expenses regarding solid waste that the water fund has expenses to.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
That's something I could expound on, Mayor, just really briefly about the transfer to the trust for, no?
Tell you what.
I'll wait till the question gets asked.
Feel free. I have to apologize. I have another commitment I've got to scoot out for. Mayor Pro Tem Bouchard is going to take you home. And I do have one question. I don't need to answer it. I got to run. But tomorrow morning with the wastewater, House Bill 1264 is being heard before the Senate Health and Human Services Committee at 8 o'clock, and I just wondered if we'll be participating in that at all, that setting up the fund for PFAS and such. So just when you get to that section, talk about that. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Sorry I have to run.
Aye, Mayor.
So what I was going to talk about very briefly, just so particularly new councilors understand, what we do is both the water and wastewater fund contribute to the highway reserve fund for paving. So the idea being that because they're under the pavement, much of the work, there's an impact on the pavement, and we make cuts. And very much like any utility, we treat ourselves just like we treat every other utility. That's a council decision. What that allows you to do is to then actually, with other utilities, when they make cuts in your road, you're able to charge them fees to offset those cuts. So we pay fees to ourselves, which then are used into the highway reserve fund, which then come out of the highway reserve fund and go into your paving fund, just as the private sector does. So essentially, we treat our utilities very much like a private utility. Wasn't that fascinating?
It was. Any more questions?
Well, I can go to the water fund if you like. I mean, the wastewater fund. So the wastewater.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
I can't tell when someone raises their hand, so I don't know if you can, or to get my attention, just raise your hand.
I can, and Brian can too, so we'll let you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the next item you'll want to go to is on item number 12. That's at page 155, and that's the wastewater fund. And here is the only place where any type of rate increase is requested. This is 8.24% rate increase. And for fiscal year 2020, revenues budget to estimate are down $455,000. Now this is due to 2 items. Sewer usage is down $242,700, And this is in line with the reduction in the water usage revenue. So less water sales means less sewer sales. And we're also using $275,000 from fund balance, which is a supplemental appropriation the City Council approved earlier this year to support the PFAS issues and for the remainder of the fiscal year 2020. So the solutions we've had to put in place to deal with those issues for this fiscal year cost you an additional $275,000. That's why that's reflected in the fiscal year 20 budget. Expenses budget to estimate are down $325,000 due to lower wages and benefits and lower utilities. Fiscal year 21 revenues budget to budget are up $152,100 or 1.9% due to increased sewer service revenues. Expenses budget to budget are down $325,700 or 3.7%. The main drivers in these decreases are wages and benefits are down $122,800, supplies are down $157,000, and debt service is down $516,200. So again, that would be other projects that were bonded in previous years are coming off the books now because they're paid for. Also included in this budget, $770,000 increase in outside services line for the offset of the sludge disposal deal with the emerging PFAS issues. So that's our additional cost based on the state's new regulations. $170,000 net reduction in our chemical expense line. So there's actually a savings there. There's $10,000 to replace chemical pumps, $5,000 for chemical tank replacements. We'll be glad to answer any questions before we go to the pro forma.
Any questions?
Councilor Todd and
Councilor Todd?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manager, would you be able to tell us approximately what the increase would mean in dollars for the average residential consumer of water?
That was $40. I believe it was about $39, $40 per year.
Per year. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Councilor Hatfield?
Councilor Hatfield?
Thank you. Two things. I was wondering if you could speak to Mayor Boulet's question, because I think if the state does create a fund for PFAS, we might be able to tap into it to offset some of that money that we're spending to treat sludge differently. And then my other question was related to energy savings, and if you think that we would actually see a reduction in utility costs for 21.
I would, let me do the same. I'll let Chip handle the first question. I'll answer the second question. I don't know if you'd actually see a savings in what the, I don't know if it would be in place enough to see the savings for the energy for the solar facility on there, but maybe Chip has a better answer than I have. I think it's in future years that you would see a savings or reduction in energy costs. I think it was between 16 and 20% or somewhere around there. But Chip, could you answer the question in terms of the scheduled meeting tomorrow?
Certainly. Can you hear me? We've been following the legislation on PFAS pretty closely. The mayor is absolutely right. Dan Driscoll from our staff will be attending that meeting. The key to any relief will be the ability of the state legislature to raise those funds. So until that happens, we need to take alternative actions, because as they meet tomorrow, they'll probably all get up and discuss it, but we need to continuously treat wastewater and on a daily basis. So that was the action that we took. We're certainly in a transitionary phase right now, and we're right at the front of the line to take advantage of anything that comes our way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. Councilor Keach, did you have a question?
I do, thank you. With regard to solid waste, sewage, as I understand it, supplied Bosquen, right, with the sewage treatment plant. Are they charged some sort of surcharge to capture our capital improvements as we go forward, or how is that structured?
Chip, could you get that one?
Certainly, there is a intermunicipal agreement with the town of Bosquen, and that lays out their proportionate share of capital and operating costs, and we reconcile that every year with them.
Follow up again. So is the rate equal to Concord's or something different?
Essentially, it's the same. There's no preference to Bosquen.
I think that's something that should be explored, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Pierce.
Yes, very quickly. When energy savings, the energy savings issue has come up a couple of times tonight across the board. When we talk about energy savings in the wastewater fund, assuming it's for the use of solar and likewise, is much of this based on net metering guidelines and functions changes in the legislature that are upcoming?
Yes, if I could, Mayor.
Please.
So the idea is that you'd have a behind the meter structure down at you think about the wastewater treatment plant on Hall Street, it's really the largest energy user. So you'd have a behind the meter structure. You can only really do about 1 megawatt right now. It's somewhere in that fashion is the max. So looking at that, we thought it's useful now to go forward and do that for two purposes. One, it's the environmentally correct thing to do, but also there could be some sort of savings associated with that to help reduce our energy usage down at the plant. You have an item on your agenda, or you will see it for this week, that Councilor Werner has been working on, and he's asked to put this on the agenda for your action to try to move that, again, the continuing push to try to move that 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts, and would be able to actually expand that type of that facility and look at different places in the city to do something. The problem with the 1 megawatt, it just gets to the point where it's marginal investment for somebody to actually make that investment and to see a reasonable return on that. So you're actually going to have an item on your agenda asking the city to come out and support with the legislature and the governor to move that 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts, and you'll be voting on that at your June 8th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? None. I think, Mr. City Manager, we can move on.
Okay, so you'll want to go to your pro forma for the wastewater, the next item.
Yep.
And if you go to projected net line under fiscal year 20, we had budgeted a loss of $889,100. So that was the planned loss. That's what we decided to do because of the amount of money that was in the fund and the investments you wanted to make, so that you would not have to do a large increase in rates. This is last year. Now the estimated loss is $1 million, and the increased loss is a direct reflection of the closure of the restaurants and the hotels and the businesses during the pandemic. Less sales, less revenue. For fiscal year 21, we are budgeting a loss of $411,300, and that is with the 8.25% rate increase. If you move down to the ending working capital numbers, fiscal year 21 ending working capital is $2.456 million, or just slightly above the target of $2.377 million. So you have the money there to do this. If you look at the remaining out years of pro forma, you will see that starting in fiscal year 2022, projected net is now positive. It will remain positive through 2026 with the projected wastewater rate increases that you see part of the pro forma. The ending working capital in 26 is planned to be ahead of the targeted working capital. You also notice that the pro forma shows the millions of dollars in capital projects projected for future years. The need for these project is the main driver for the rate increases. So it's not wages, it's not staffing, it's really replacing of essentially the piece by piece replacing of this plant. The need for these projects is the main driver for that rate increase. I'd be glad to answer any questions on the pro forma before we move to the comparison chart.
Any questions? I don't see any. Do you see, City Manager?
No, I do not.
Okay, without any questions, we'll move on.
So you want to go to the comparison chart, which is the next item. And the comparison chart shows the current rate is the current rate we're the fourth lowest, and with the rate increase would be the fifth, so we'll be moving up there. So you can see it's relatively close to Rochester and Keene, and slightly ahead of somewhat ahead of Derry and Manchester, but considerably below Dover and Portsmouth. And one thing to remember about the wastewater fund, I believe that Portsmouth is the only other community that has two plants. So you're actually trying to manage the capital associated with two plants instead of one. So there's obviously an inefficiency there. One deals up in the Pennacook area and then one down on Hall Street. So that drives a lot of, and because a lot of this is capital, you're keeping both of those plants managing, and you do need to have two plants. So you can't simply go with one. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? I see none. Do you, City Manager, see any questions?
I do not.
Any questions at all on the wastewater fund before we leave this agenda item? Seeing none?
And that was the last item.
Move on.
So I don't have anything else to present.
Nothing? Okay. So other new business?
None.
None?
Well, you have a meeting coming up on Thursday, June 4th, and you will, at that point, you'll have a public hearing, take any input from the community. And if anything, we receive anything between now and then, we'll make sure you have it available to you. And then that is also the night, generally the night where you have a discussion in terms of any changes that you would like to make in the proposed budget, because the budget I gave you was just a starting point. Obviously, you can make many, many changes and make it all work much better. And then what you would generally have done in the past is then put that down for a public hearing, which you would have on the 15th, and give people plenty of time to give you information and input on that. And then you would take a final vote based on where we are today. You take a final vote on the 15th, and you would try to adopt the budget that night.
So once again, this Thursday on the 4th is the time where the public can Zoom in and express their concerns for.
Right, and also we take any type of information that comes in through emails or whatnot and make sure we get it out to you as soon as we possibly can, so you'll have time to consider it before you make any tentative decisions on the 4th to set down a budget, a revised budget for the public hearing on the 15th.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manager. That leaves us with agenda item 15, adjournment. Anybody like to
Clerk Kretovic moves to adjourn.
All right,
Okay.
seconded
Maxim,
by
seconds.
Councilor Pierce. Roll call, please.
Councilor Kretovic.
Yes.
Councilor Matson.
Yes.
Councilor Nyan.
Yes. Yes.
Councilor Pierce.
Yes.
Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Yes.
Councilor Todd.
Yes.
Councilor Werner.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bouchard.
Yes.
Councilor Champlin.
Yes.
Councilor Fennessy.
Absent, I think.
Councilor Grady Sexton.
Yes.
Councilor Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilor Keach.
Yes.
Councilor Kennison.
Yes.
Receives the needed support.
Wonderful. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, counselors and staff. See you Thursday night.
Very informative. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.